All right, we're a little bit behind time. We were told Barbara Yaroslavsky's on her way, but I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome you all to the Midwifery Advisory Council meeting. I'm Carrie Sparavon. As most of you know, I'm the chair of the committee. I'd like to remind everybody to please turn your cell phones to vibrate or off. This meeting is being webcasted. And if you would like to provide public comment, please fill out a speaker slip that you can find in the back of the room and give it to Miss Lowe, who is here in the front row. Great. I'd also like to remind everyone that following this meeting, an interested parties meeting to discuss potential regulations for the implementation of AB 1308, which passed this year, will be held in this room beginning at 1:30. And I'm now like to call this meeting to order. Ms. Lowe, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Burns?
Here.
Ms. Ehrlich?
Here.
Ms. Marcelin?
Here.
Ms. Webster? Here. Ms. Yaroslavsky? Ms. Sparavon?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. So the first agenda item is items for public comment that are not on today's agenda. Are there any comments for items that are not on the agenda today? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on. Agenda item 3 is approval of the minutes from the August 8th, 2013 meeting. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Great. Any comments from committee members of? All right, I'll start then because I have a few. Paragraph 3 on page 6 states that SB 304 does not currently include language to add CNMs as student supervisors, but I'm pretty sure that should read does include language. Okay. Page 6 to 7 regarding supervision removal. I'm pretty sure that at that meeting, physician supervision was already written in as removed, but somebody else is going to have to fact check that for me, but I'm pretty certain, given the rest of the discussion around that it had been, the language had already been written to remove it. Okay, yeah, so you don't think it was, Ms. Rock? Okay, Ms. Rock says no. All right. So that one's okay? All right. And then page 7, the third paragraph from the bottom, there's a discussion of a report, but the report's not identified, and I think it was talked about. I think what we're talking about there is the report requiring hospitals to submit a report for every transfer that came in, but it's not identified further up, and it's not identified there, so we need to catch that and fix it. Page 8, paragraph 5, there's more questions regarding that report. And there's a miswording as to who would submit it. It says that the midwives would submit it when actually it's hospitals that would submit it. That's all I have. What are yours, Karen?
Okay. On page 7, in the third paragraph down, that the law, towards the end of the paragraph, normal birth is defined as a singleton vertex between 37 to 42 with no pre-existing disease or condition that would significantly impact the pregnancy. I would add with no pregnancy-related, and I would change diseases to outcomes.
But I don't think that's what was said.
That was not what was said?
No.
Okay.
Because we were talking about what the actual language was, and the language says diseases, not outcomes.
Okay. Then in a couple of paragraphs down, it says Ms. Rock also shared that the bill requires licensed midwives to provide records and give reports. The bill would allow, isn't it the council in the law that is, it's the board may adjust?
It's the board and the MAC.
It's together.
But language was still getting adjusted at that point, so.
Pardon?
In conjunction with the MAC, I think.
In conjunction, it doesn't? Okay. You are more conversant with that than I. The next page, page 8, I have a question about the last sentence in the first paragraph. The patient is given a stipulation to provide emergency sessions for 30 days. Is it to be provided? Next page 8.
That's verbatim.
It's verbatim,
Check that.
because it doesn't really make sense.
That's what was said.
Okay. Page 7, page 8. Page 6 in the minutes themselves, page 8 in the packet. On that same page, 2/3 of the way down, the paragraph that starts, Dr. Byrne mentioned, the last word should be threatening, not threating. That's just a typo. And I guess that is it. I thought I had one more item, but I don't see it, so onward.
All right. Are there any other comments on the minutes? Any of the members on the MAC? No. All right. So seeing no no further questions on this agenda item, is there a motion to approve the minutes from the August
So
8th
moved.
meeting? Do I have a second? Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank
No,
you.
you have one abstention. I wasn't present. You have one abstention. I wasn't
Oh,
present.
okay. Barbara Yaroslavsky is abstaining. Very good. All right. So. There we go. So, agenda item 4 is my report. So I would say that 2013 has been a really productive and exciting year for licensed midwives in California. With the passage of AB 1308 and the removal of physician supervision from our requirements, a major step forward has been made towards improving the interface between licensed midwives and physicians on hospitals. I look forward to Ms. Simo's agenda item and hearing more from her regarding this really significant legislation. It's my hope that as communication opens between these providers, smooth transfers of care will become the norm, and this will ultimately improve outcomes for birthing families. I look forward to working with all of the interested parties to create the regulations dictated by this legislation, and I'm confident we can move forward in ways that both protect the autonomy and the safety of birthing women. There are a number of items today on the agenda that are going to require work groups and possibly task forces to accomplish, and I'm hopeful that many of the talented people in this audience will volunteer to work on these. The specifics will be delineated as we move forward. Are there any comments on this agenda item? All right. Let's move forward then. All right, Ms. Simoes, Chief of Legislation for the Medical Board, will now provide us the update on AB 1308.
Thank you. Good morning. So has been previously mentioned, AB 1308 Bonilla was signed into law by the governor. And I know we've talked a little bit about this bill, but I'm just going to go briefly over what was in the bill. So this bill removes the physician supervision requirement for licensed midwives and requires licensed midwives to only accept clients that meet the criteria for normal pregnancy and childbirth as specified in the bill. And this is the part that will require regulations, and as the chair mentioned, we will be discussing those regulations at the interested parties meeting at the conclusion of this meeting. If a potential client does not meet the criteria for normal pregnancy and childbirth, then the licensed midwife can refer that client to a physician trained in obstetrics and gynecology for examination. The licensed midwife can only accept the client if the physician examines the client and determines that the risk factors are not likely to significantly affect the course of pregnancy and childbirth. This bill also allows licensed midwives to directly obtain supplies and devices, obtain and administer drugs and diagnostic tests, order testing, and receive reports that are necessary to his or her practice of midwifery and consistent with the licensed midwife's scope of practice. This bill requires licensed midwives to obtain informed consent as specified in the bill. This bill requires licensed midwives to provide records and speak to the receiving physician if the client is transferred to a hospital. The bill requires the hospital to report each transfer of a planned out-of-hospital birth to the medical board and the California Maternal Quality Care Collaborative using a form developed by the board. This bill requires all licensed midwives to complete midwifery education programs and does not allow new licensees to substitute clinical experience for formal didactic education beginning January 1st, 2015. This bill allows the board, with input from the Midwifery Advisory Council, which is what we were kind of talking about earlier, so it does say with input from the Midwifery Advisory Council, to look at the data elements required to be reported by licensed midwives to better coordinate with other reporting systems, including the reporting system of the Midwives Alliance of North America. Lastly, this bill allows licensed midwives to attend births in alternative birth centers and changes the standards of certification that must be met by an alternative birth center to those established by the American Association of Birth Centers. So if you turn to tab 5, that analysis, the board has an implementation plan for this bill, and that's on page 5 of the analysis. And so I'll just quickly go through them. The board plans to notify all licensed midwives of the changes in this bill. We will be working on updating the board's website to reflect the changes in the law. And then the next part is what we talked about. We're going to be working with interested parties and stakeholders to develop regulations, which will happen at our interested parties meeting. We will be working on developing processes and procedures for hospital reporting of each transfer of a planned out-of-hospital birth, and the board will need to develop a form for this reporting. And we will also be working on the MAX agenda. We'll have an item reviewing the existing reporting data elements and possible changes to coordinating with other reporting systems, including MANA. And we will provide outreach to new licensed midwife applicants. The challenge mechanism will no longer be available effective January 1st, 2015. So that concludes my presentation, unless there's any questions.
I have one.
Okay.
It seems to me the challenge mechanism could stay in place for those midwives that were formally trained outside the country with didactic training, because it doesn't completely it doesn't remove the challenge mechanism. It only allows for there to be some didactic training so that not all of it is clinical experience. And we're going to have midwives coming from, we already do, from places like Iran and the UK and possibly from Canada and other places where they have had formal training that meets our requirements, but the only way for them to actually become licensed here would be to challenge. So we need to really really think about that and look at it.
I'll have to refer to legal counsel, because when this bill was going through the process, that is what the negotiation was, that the challenge, that was my understanding, that the challenge mechanism was going to be removed. I don't know if Constance or Sarah have another reading on it, but that's, in my talks with the author's office, that's why they pushed back the date, and so we could let people know about it. The question was brought up of what are the other mechanisms for out of country or out of, and that was brought up, and that was something that was discussed, but as far as my understanding was, that was removing the challenge mechanism.
So does the board have a mechanism for accepting educational background from outside the country?
So let me ask a question, interrupt you while you're going forward with that question before you get to that point and asking the question. Mm-hmm. Is it possible to consider that we should move forward with it as is now, so we get it moving it off of the table and out the door, and go back and review it prior to whenever legislation needs to be implemented for the coming year, and have that as part of cleanup language for the bill?
Yeah, it's definitely something we can look at, and I could have, if you have more questions, I don't know if maybe.
My concern is that if we're going to start to monkey with this now, we're not going to.
I'm not asking to monkey with it. I'm asking for clarification.
I apologize.
Is there currently a process for licensees coming from outside of the country who did attend a program that meets the requirements of the law, but isn't approved by the board to become licensed?
Indeed, the stipulation states new licensees shall not substitute clinical experience for formal didactic education, and if they have formal didactic education in their country of origin.
Then they should be able to go through the challenges, would be my understanding of that. Sarah, would you like to come forward and...
Doesn't this
Good,
only
thank
take
you.
place after 2015?
Yeah, January 1st,
Yeah,
2015.
yeah.
But we will probably have foreigners coming to the country who have midwifery training elsewhere after January 1st, 2015.
Right. We need to kind of get
Yeah.
it clarified.
The reason that it was written the way it was instead of striking the entire paragraph about the challenge was to allow for the continuance of the challenge mechanism, just not for apprentice-only trained midwives.
Okay.
Otherwise, the entire paragraph would be gone.
Thank you.
All right.
Can
Okay.
I have a question for context?
Yeah.
For both physicians and registered nurses, those who have trained outside the U.S., when they come to California and apply for licensure, they often have to repeat their training and validate their credentialing. It's not a given that their
Right.
foreign training constitutes California standards. So I'm just a little confused because I'm an idiot sometimes. Are we saying that that is acceptable if someone had foreign didactic training but without a mechanism necessarily validating meets our
No,
standards?
No, they would need to complete the challenge mechanism, which is a way to validate their previous training and experience, and
That's
it's
what the
a whole
challenge-
set of exams and
That's what
and
the
everything
challenge
to
has always
validate
been.
that. Yeah.
Is
That's
a
it.
verification of skills, information, knowledge. Yeah,
So
it has not just been to have somebody say, oh, I've been midwiving, therefore I'm a midwife, and I'm
I don't know
challenging.
how stringent the
Oh, it
challenge
was stringent. We had to submit, and always have, the challenge has had to do with submitting charts, having the charts read by a CNM and an MD and sign off on them, and then taking a series of clinical and skills exams. The challenge was always, I believe, fairly rigorous.
Yeah, it's just as we move forward, the board really wanted to eliminate the pathway of the purely apprentice-trained midwife who never had any didactic training at all. And those are going to be midwives primarily from the U.S.
So, and we do have some time, so we can, look at this again and have our legal look into it. And it's not till January 1st, 2015, so we have a little time on that part.
Right. I would like legal to interpret 2516G, because there seems to be some discourse over whether it means the data elements that are to be collected in the LMAR can be changed. I'm hearing that was the intent, was that we could delete and add where needed to come in line with MANA, but I'm also hearing that that's not possible to delete anything from the law. So I'm going to let Ms. Webb.
We have a statute that's still in effect, that's 2516 from Business and Professions Code, and we can't create a regulation that is in conflict with that statute. What we can do is to provide more clarification, and that's something that we can work on. To delete items from there, it would require a statutory change.
So we could add items, though? Do you read it that way? That we could add data elements?
Through regulation, yeah, we can add some additional stuff, but we can't take something away from that statute that wasn't changed through this.
So in other words, in the section that Carrie is questioning, where it says the number, reason, and outcome for each urgent or emergency transport of an infant or mother during the intrapartum or immediate postpartum period, we could ask for more detail from each midwife on what those were about.
Yes.
Okay.
And if there's some questions that have been confusing, we can, put like an EG for an example that helps to clarify what it is that is being asked.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any more information from you, Ms. Simoes, or any other comments from the audience or the council?
I have a couple things that have been brought up to me as midwives in our area have been discussing the changes. Among them are that there are some certified nurse midwives who would like to become LMs, take on an LM license. So it may well be that there will need to be some adjusting of the application in order to do this, because they clearly have didactic training and they clearly have clinical experience, but they are primarily functioning out of hospital, and they feel that this license would better suit what they actually do. Then I have had a couple of RNs talk to me about how they might take advantage of becoming LMs, utilizing some of their RN training and perhaps experience. So those are things that I think the medical board might want to consider as we go along in these changes from the law. Yes.
The midwifery application as it is now has not been revised in several years, so that has been on our radar to update it to current. But with the new changes, that'll definitely be something that we're looking at, as well as providing updated information on our website. So that is on our list of things to accomplish.
Is there any sense of when we might anticipate that that is available for, say, current CNMs to be able to make such an application?
They're not going to be exempt from taking the NARM exam, I wouldn't
Well,
think,
that is
because that's
Still
in
a
statute.
requirement of
Yeah.
law.
It's not as clear as you're trying to make it, so that has to
I'm
be
sure.
evaluated by legal and our staff to see what would be required for someone who is a licensed CNM to whether or not they would fit the licensing requirements and how they might fit the licensing requirements of a licensed midwife. So there is a difference between the two license types and the qualifications for those. So that's going to take a little more staff time to look at that, and that's something that we will look at for you. But as far as just changing our application, that's not that simple. So
I
Yeah.
believe that. May I ask then that we be updated as those are considered by the board staff?
yeah, but that'll be something that the staff can look at, and once we get a little farther along on that, because we'll have to work with our legal staff on that. So.
It would seem to me that at this juncture, without any changes in statute, that CNMs, since no CNM school is approved by the board, they're going to have to go through the challenge mechanism. I don't see any other way around it at this point.
Unless they would qualify for reciprocity.
Well,
They held a license in another state.
Yeah, but
that we
that's going to
recognize.
take action
But-
by board and staff too, so,
Well, as I said, it's not
Yeah.
quite as simple as it sounds.
yeah. I don't think it's just to change the application. Did you have more, Karen?
I know that when it became clear that we were authorized by current law to get lab accounts, there were still labs in the state that were refusing us lab accounts, even though there was a letter on the medical board website stating that it was within our right to have those. I would like, given that that has been our experience over quite a few years now, with the change in the law, I would like to see some kind of a letter coming to all the LMs stating that we have the ability to order labs, that we may order ultrasounds, that we may receive oxygen on our own license, that we may receive the drugs and devices that are needed for our professional use on the authority of our own licenses. I would like to have that so that the midwives can take this letter to supply houses, to the hospitals where ultrasounds would be ordered, so that it is really clear. I know that the medical board, people whom I've talked to about this, about the original lab issue, said that since it's on our on the medical board website, that is current and that is sufficient, and it hasn't been. There are some of the people that I've talked to have said the lab manager, the account managers have required a letter that has a date and that has a signature of a medical board staff person, and without those they would not accept that letter as valid. I would like to see such a letter coming so that we can have it in our hands and be able to have proof for those managers who might question our law.
I'm wondering why we can't just use the statute. It's right there in the law, and providing them with a copy of that should be sufficient. They have lawyers that can look at it and determine whether that's.
That is true,
To
I
happen.
believe, and yet, despite the fact that there was a law that we could have lab accounts, the labs were still refusing lab accounts.
Well, really, before the reason why they weren't is because they were looking for the physician supervisor, and they wanted a physician supervisor to sign off, and that's when we met with CDPH and had someone from CDPH say, it's not your job to worry about who their physician supervisor is. Like Harry says, that Ms. Fairvon says, now that the law has changed and you're not requiring a physician supervisor, all you would really, I mean, I don't think we have anything opposed to writing a letter, but all you would really need to do is take that copy of the law, and there is no physician supervisor. You're authorized to obtain lab tests. Should be as simple as that, but.
I would
The
recommend
is
that
perhaps
that a
operative.
letter in the hand of a midwife is not really maybe considered as official as maybe what you're trying to look like. And the idea of taking the law or doing outreach, or we can do better outreach with those labs or those pharmacy entities and make sure that they're either directed to the website or they receive an email with a link to the website with a clarification letter from the medical board. It might be much more official looking and perceived then as more real.
I can understand that. All I know is that that was the experience
Well,
of
but
some
if you're
people
having
who've spoken
experiences,
with
but
me.
if you're having experiences like that, or
Yeah.
if the community is hearing experiences like that, I think it warrants being reported back to the medical board and let the medical board staff try and figure out what is the best way to do outreach with those entities that are not being receptive to what the law is currently.
Yeah, I think now that we have a new law, we need to kind of at least give it a few months to see whether something's going to change, and maybe at the next MAC meeting we could revisit that, and people could then bring their stories. Look, we tried it this way, that way, and sideways, and it's not working, or it seems like it's working fine, and we could hear back from people then. Does that seem reasonable?
Certainly.
Yes.
Okay.
What? I think that's it for now. I might bring some other stuff up later. I don't think it necessarily has to do with Ms. Zamo's. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any public comment? Any more council comment? All right. Seeing none, we're going to move to the next agenda item, which would be yours, Ms. Ehrlich, to show us the statistical comparison on the LMAR statistics for the last few years.
Thank you. On the back table is this chart about the outcomes of out-of-hospital births based in all of the licensed midwife annual reports from 2007 through 2012. I believed that I was going to have the entire breakdown from 2007 to 2012 for people, but I had computer glitches. So I have all of the data with me, but it is not in any kind of a form that is legible to everybody. It is legible perhaps only to me. So I don't have that for everybody here today. I will make sure that that is available for the March meeting of the Midwifery Council. But our data does be, over the 6 years now that we have reporting, remarkably consistent, which I have had epidemiologists tell me helps to validate the data as we have it. There are also things that, as I went about doing the compilation here, is that it got clear to me once again that we need to have better data, especially about perinatal deaths. There are 3 lines in the LMAR that refer to fetal demises and perinatal deaths. There's section E, and then there are sections O and P, and all 3 of them give us different numbers of babies who died. So there is no way at this point to really be able to get a good, solid, clear handle on perinatal death stats. And I hope that it is one of the early things that we can manage to fix, as we are now mandated to change the licensed midwife annual report.
Thank you. Are there any comments from council members on this? Any comments from the audience? All right. Thank you, Karen. All right. So now we have a discussion on licensees and surrendered status returning to practice. It was requested at the last MAC meeting that Ms. Lowe would provide us a brief overview of this process for licensure reinstatement.
So I provided you all with a copy of the board's petition packet. If you don't have it, let me know. There's also copies on the back table if anyone in the audience wants to follow along. So as requested, we're providing a brief overview of the petition process, which is when a licensee is in a surrendered status or revoked status or returning from probation. As outlined in Business and Professions Code Section 2307, which is included in your packet on page 15, a person whose certificate has been surrendered while under investigation or while charges are pending, or whose certificate has been revoked or suspended or placed on probation, may petition the board for reinstatement or modification of penalty, including modification or termination of probation. In order to petition for reinstatement, the petitioner would need to contact the board's discipline coordination unit and request the petition packet to be provided. The packet, which would be sent out to the petitioner, is what has been provided to you. The packet outlines the requirements to petition as well as the processes involved. The packet requires the petitioner to complete the application, answering questions as to their practice background, current occupation, employment history, rehabilitation, and questions pertaining to their activities, including if they have any pending criminal action, been convicted of any criminal offense, charged or disciplined by another board, etc. The petition packet must also include a brief narrative statement giving a factual description of the offense that was the basis of the action which prompted the original order. For petitions for reinstatement, the narrative must also include answers to the questions: during the period of time that your license has been revoked or surrendered, how have you earned a living? What aspect of your rehabilitation do you feel will protect against the occurrence of your prior conduct? What are your plans if your license is reinstated? And where will you practice, and what type of practice will it be? The packet also requires that 2 verifiable letters of recommendation from midwives licensed in any state who have personal knowledge of the petitioner's activities since the date of order must be provided. We also require that fingerprints be submitted at the time of application. Once the board receives the petition packet, it's reviewed by an analyst to determine completeness and that it is a viable application. And by viable, I mean that it meets the requirements of law, that the law requires the packet cannot be submitted until a certain time frame has passed based on the type of reinstatement. That's in section 2307 also. For a petition for reinstatement, a person may file a petition after a period of at least 3 years from the elapsed time from the effective date of the surrender or revocation for unprofessional conduct. Petition for early termination of probation. If the ordered period of probation is 3 years or more, a petition may be filed when at least 2 years have elapsed from the effective date of the disciplinary action. And then for petition for modification of probation, a person may file when at least 1 year has elapsed from the effective date. So the law does outline when someone can apply to reinstate their license. It's not just a matter of, I want to come back and I'm going to submit the packet now.
Could you repeat those 3 time frames for me?
It is included, just so you know, on the front page of that petition packet.
Thank you.
The bullets 1, 2, and 3. It's also outlined in the law, just so you know. So once the board determines the application is complete, they will file the petition with the Attorney General's office. And once the petition is filed, approximately 120 days after filing with the AG's office, a hearing is set. A hearing is preceded by an administrative law judge who will listen to the case, and at that time the petitioner can provide evidence of rehabilitation and state their reasoning for coming back to a licensed status. After the hearing, the judge is permitted 30 days to render a decision upon which the board will act, either adopting or non-adopting the decision. So it is a process that the board joins in with the Attorney General's office. It's not just the board making the decision or board staff making a decision on whether a license can be reinstated. It also is not as easy as just submitting an initial application to come back to licensed status. So the petition process can take approximately 1 year from the date the completed packet is received by the board until the board receives a final decision. That completes my overview. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from the council?
Yeah, the packet that I have in front of me says letters of recommendation for physicians licensed in any state. So that would be modified for licensed midwives?
Currently, the board only has this one petition packet, and
Right.
we use it for all license types. It's not as common for our allied health license types to apply, which is why we don't have individual packets at this time. There's a footnote that
Right, that
for
podiatrists.
podiatrists, just basically if a midwife is going to reinstate, they can use this application and just, where it says physician, a surgeon, apply midwifery.
So if somebody wanted to get a petition from you, you would tell them that that paragraph meant really
Right.
they had to have a,
When they call in, we have an analyst in the discipline coordination unit who handles the petition packets, and she would go over the processes and
okay,
what's involved.
Thank you.
Is there a place on the website, and if there isn't, could we create one, like on the midwives page that says if your license was suspended or revoked and you would or surrendered and you would like to reinstate it, click here and it could take them to information about this?
Yeah, we can add additional information to the midwifery page. Currently, the packet is available online under, I believe it's under petition.
Yeah, it's just
We can link it though.
that would be
It's
great
easier.
if it could be linked. As sometimes midwives aren't as computer savvy as others. Actually, sometimes physicians aren't very computer savvy either. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Any more council comment? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Ms. Lowe.
Mhm.
So now we have the program update from Ms. Lowe.
Okay. So before I get into the statistics, I'm going to update you on just the overall program updates.
Can you just briefly tell us what Breeze is? Because I'm not really clear.
Breeze is the Department of Consumer Affairs online licensing system, which is used for internal processing of applications, renewals, issuing licenses, as well as an online site for consumers that can verify licenses and file complaints.
Okay.
So
Great.
I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in just
Thank
a
you.
moment. So overall, the midwifery program, currently we are still in the process of hiring behind our midwifery analyst, Ms. Morrish. We are having the duty statement reviewed and it's currently pending at the department. So as soon as we receive that back, we'll be beginning the hiring process and interviews. We have been receiving numerous calls and inquiries regarding the midwifery program, and we are doing the best we can to respond to those calls and emails and reviewing the applications as they come in. There is currently some pending applications. I believe at this time there's maybe 8 that's currently pending review, and I anticipate those getting done within the next 2 weeks and notifying the applicants of any pending deficiencies. We have been issuing licenses in Breeze. I believe a couple have been issued since we've gone to Breeze, but in the overall numbers, that's 2 out of 10 applications that were pending. So we don't have a huge backlog. One of the issues that we are facing now that we've gone to Breeze is obtaining fingerprint results, and that is being worked out. We have the department working on the issues, but some of the things that if an application is complete, we still have to have the fingerprint responses, and that's taking a little extra time to get those in order to complete the application.
Do they come to you electronically?
They do come over electronically, but there are issues with our system of actually getting the
Matching 'em up.
results out of the system. So we are, like I said, it's something that the department is working on, but there are multiple issues with the Breeze system that's causing delays across the board.
Thank you.
But as part of the delay process, are they being notified that there are computer glitches and that it's, sometimes giving people information is better than making them wait, so that as long as we are making the effort to inform people that we've received your application, we're in the process, we've started a new computer system, there's some glitches, it's going to take a little longer than necessary, we hope you'll be patient, makes for a whole lot more friends than enemies.
And we do recognize that. And
No, are you doing that is the question.
the question, no. We're
Can
getting
you?
the calls, we're answering the calls when we can. I don't think at this point we have, I don't have staff to process these applications, so I am processing them, and I'm trying.
Oh, no, I'm not
Back to
questioning
the
that you're not trying.
applicants.
And the issue is just to let people know that you've received the application, that there are computer glitches, there's a staffing, just to let people know. If you've
Right.
only got 8 people that you're hanging on to, because you don't have staff to do it, I understand that, but to let them know would be my recommendation.
I will take that into consideration. Okay.
Is it
Okay.
a moment to discuss Breeze, or should I wait till the end of the report?
Nope. I'm going to get to that right now. Okay, so the online licensing system did go live in October, and with that came many problems. So they are trying to get addressed. We're working diligently. We have multiple workarounds, basically for every application process the board has. It's not a push of a button. It's manually doing many things. So It's definitely not as smooth as I think the board would hope, but it will eventually get to the point that the system will work as it needed. As I mentioned, some of the problems that we're facing is the fingerprint responses, which we cannot get out of the system. That's being resolved, hopefully. Also, renewals. They are not currently available online for midwives to renew, so they're mailing in their applications. We've had issues with the printing for Breeze, actually printing the renewals. We've had issues with the processing of the renewals when they come in, that on your renewal statement for midwives, it indicates they have to sign for continuing medical education, as well as if they've had a conviction since the last time they renewed. If one of those answers are not marked on the application, a notice is generated out of the system and mailed out to complete the renewal. There's issues with those letters getting printed. There's issues with the right letters getting printed. So with that, we're not sending out those letters. It's actually, we get the letters that are printed and we manually look up every single one of them to determine if it's the right letter, and if not, we generate the right letter. So processes in the past prior to Breeze that were smooth and we didn't even have to think about or handle or add staff work to is now becoming a very time-consuming process. So that adds into the delays that we're seeing in this program. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that when the Breeze system is complete or more complete, online midwives will be able to apply for initial applications as well as renew their licenses. They can submit requests for verification letters, name changes, duplicate certificates if necessary. So that is still in the works. It's been slated for a later release, and those items are starting to come up now to test and will be tested, and once they're approved, they'll be pushed out to the web. But I don't have an anticipated time of when that will be showing up online. So that, in the meantime though, before we go online, applications can still be printed from our website and mailed in. Renewals, when you get the forms, they can be mailed in, or if you've not received your renewal form for whatever reason, you can contact the board and we can get that out to you. So that concludes my Breeze update.
Thank you. Okay. Do you want to take questions now on Breeze or, okay. Any comments?
I realize that my particular comment is kind of fluff and is not something that's going to get addressed before the whole website is functioning well. What I did notice is that in a couple of places where I needed to make a choice of one thing or another in order to move forward, they were really easy to not be seen. And that in places where in order to go ahead, you've got to make an answer, that they be larger than the regular type for the whole rest of the screen. Does that make sense to you, what I'm saying?
It does.
Okay.
And
yeah, that would be the one thing. I found it like frustrating because I kept on going, well, I'm not choosing anything here, so I'm trying to go ahead.
right, and the board staff has tested these screens and these applications that are online, and we've made numerous requests for changes, and we've been rejected on a lot of them, that it's a system-wide, if we change it here, we have to change it everywhere, and it's not necessarily
It's not a breeze, is that what you're saying?
some things still are a work in progress, and they will be updated and changed, but there are a lot of things that the answer is it's system-wide, and it's this way for everyone, so it's this way for you.
I realize this is low on the list, what I'm saying.
We've made multiple requests, though, and the outcome that's online is the best that the board staff could get. So, are there any other questions?
Any other questions from council members? Any public comment on Breeze?
Diane Holzer, Moore County midwife. So my question is because in my area, people are starting to get worried because their renewals aren't coming back and their time is coming up. So what happens if a midwife sends in her renewal, but staff hasn't gotten to the point of processing it, and their time has lapsed and they don't have their renewal back yet? I have at least 2 people in my area who are in that situation of it almost happening.
Okay, so I will say that the renewal says that the process can take, I believe, 6 weeks.
This has been months.
Okay, so if it's been months, I would recommend that they contact me, and I can look into it.
Nobody's answering the phone, it appears.
Okay, well, I'll give you my card and my email, and we'll get that taken care of, or you can give me their information. But we do have the call center, which is taking calls for all of our license types. It's a general number for the board. And any questions on renewals, they're documenting what the issue is and providing to me, and I'm looking it up for all license types across the board. A lot of the issues that we're seeing is what I mentioned, is that the deficiency letters for the renewals were not generated or not sent out. We're trying to be proactive on those and getting them fixed, but if we don't know about them, it's a little bit difficult to get them resolved.
Okay, so maybe contacting you directly might help them? Okay.
On that level, the last time I did try to call, it still said, "This is Susan Moorish."
Susan Morris's
Meeting, I know.
desk, yeah, it's still her line, but I have my own line, so I'll give you my direct and we'll get that updated.
I just think we ought to take her name off and have that line say,
people
"Please
still
call
thinking.
so-and-so instead," and here's
And
the number.
we are obtaining those voicemail messages and getting back to people, so.
I'd also maybe ask that California Association of Midwives could put a message out to all of their members saying, look, this is the process right now, and it's new and it's glitchy and things are going to take longer, and if you haven't heard, back in 6 weeks on your renewal, then you probably ought to call. And the same for new licenses, I would think.
And if the renewals are mailed to our board, we don't have a backlog of renewals here, and I don't believe DCA has a backlog of renewals. They're being processed timely.
So it's through Breeze that it's the problem?
No, not even that. The main problem that we're having is, like I said, those deficiency letters when the letters get generated, we're getting them and fixing them and sending them out right away. So I think the worst is over, to be quite honest, and that now it should be a smoother process. After the last couple of weeks, I think we'll be okay.
I think that what we've heard today really points out the need that we need to be able to talk to each other, and but by the same token, talking to each other doesn't solve the problem. That if people are having issues out there in the field with anything, they need to contact the medical board. It's not going to happen because you're going to talk to your community. People need to be, and we need to ask our partners, strategic partners, to also put out to their community the information that this is the phone number, this is the time you need to call, and make the effort, because we can't expect staff to do stuff that they don't have. They can't.
No,
They can't fix
I
things.
totally agree.
So I think that what we've just heard is a good example of what we have to push our people to contact.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other comments on Breeze? Okay.
Well, I just wanted to know if once Breeze is fully operational, will people not be allowed to use paper and mail?
We'll always, I'm assuming, allow a paper application to be submitted.
Well, I meant renewals.
Yeah, the renewal process is pretty nice when you renew online. It's immediate. That's one of the benefits, is that you answer your 3 questions, or verify your address and put your credit card in, and it's done. If you answer the questions correctly, your expiration date's updated immediately.
Okay.
Now with the new system, even if you mail it here to our board and we process it, your expiration date's not going to update for at least 4 to 5 business days. So we would highly encourage people, once it's available online, to use that mechanism to renew.
What's the time frame again for it being available online?
For the actual renewal application,
Yeah.
I don't have a time frame when the midwifery renewal will be available.
Okay.
Hopefully within the next couple months, but
Okay. So you'll update us again in March.
absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
I would just like to, dovetailing on what Ms. Marceline just said, is that there are midwives I know who will not use computers. Yeah, it would be nice. And I think that as us dinosaurs age and go away, that will happen less and less. But for the moment, we need to be able to keep paper available.
Absolutely, it's available.
Will renewals be sent out paper?
Yes,
Okay.
for now.
Once we're able to do it on Breeze, will they continue to be a paper renewal notice?
Yes.
And with directions to go to the website if they want to renew that
Yeah,
way?
and that's how it currently is. The renewals are generated and it says pay online, go to Breeze, and it gives
Okay,
you the
but,
link
but we
there.
can't currently do that on Breeze, right? Okay. Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next agenda item B is the licensing statistics. It's pretty basic. If you want to refer to tab 8 in your packets, and that would be for the statistics for the first quarter of fiscal year 2013-14, which was July 1st through September 30th of 2013. During this time, 2 new applications were received, 1 license was issued, and at the end of the quarter, 298 licenses were in a renewed current status and 24 were in a delinquent status. There's also some additional statistics provided. If you have any questions, otherwise I'll move on to the enforcement statistics. And that's on page 18. During the quarter, 2 new complaints were received. 1 was against the licensed midwife and 1 was against an unlicensed midwife. 2 new investigations were opened during the quarter, and there were no referrals for disciplinary or criminal actions. There's also additional statistics for your review. Otherwise, that does conclude my update.
On the ones where we had the 2 complaints received, do we know yet whether they are being considered for action? Are they're still open? Do we know that?
There were no referrals for any action at this time. I don't know the status of those 2 complaints, but if that complaint that was filed during that time was referred during that time,
It would be on this sheet.
logically, yes, we would see at least 1 was referred, but I can't tell you if that would be the one or not. I don't know the outcome.
Would it read as closed anywhere if it had been closed?
On the statistics in front of you, it says number of complaints received, but you go down to investigations and you have number of open investigations. It's the same number, so I have to assume that they're open and they won't be closed until they're closed. And we don't know when things are open or closed. They're just either they're in process or they're not.
Okay.
And also, though, the status of a complaint is not public information. So these statistics here, the investigations that are open are not necessarily those 2 complaints that were received.
Right,
And
they could be carryovers
administrative
from last
filings
fiscal
are
year,
not
right?
exactly. So all I can tell you is that nothing's been filed.
I have a question on the midwifery program licensing statistics. I'm assuming that I'm reading this correctly, that at the bottom it says renewed or current status. This is currently there are 298 current midwifery licenses, but it doesn't seem to add up. If I look at the number of doesn't everybody have to renew every year?
Every
Other year.
Oh, every other year. Okay.
It's every other year, and it also
Now
doesn't
it'll
take
work.
into any of those that have been canceled during the time frame or
Okay,
deceased.
thank you. That's right. I thank you for clarifying that.
I have a question because it came up for a friend for me this year, and you guys did a great job of handling it for her. She had let her license lapse for several years because she wasn't practicing, and then she wanted to practice again, and you guys, I'm really, really pleased at how quickly you fixed it for her. I think it took less than a week. But one of the issues was that she couldn't go to the LMAR report for this year and do it in August. So how are we handling, because I know that we've gotten better at submitting our LMARs, but we're not perfect yet at getting them on time. And so what's the latest that people can submit online without having to get a paper one for the current year?
If I am remembering correctly, the license had to be in a current status in order for her to submit the
Right.
application.
Right.
So her license was delinquent.
Right.
She'd already submitted one. There was a hold, though, on her license
Right.
to get those updated. So I think it's a pretty rare
It
case
is.
that it would happen, but this one was a situation where the chicken comes before the egg type thing. We couldn't do ours without theirs. They couldn't do theirs without ours. So
Right.
we worked with them and
Got
resolved
it
the issue.
fixed. You
So
did great.
I think if it came up again, it's going to be that type of situation where we have to manually work with the licensee to get that resolved.
Why does it need to be that way? I mean, why does it need to be that they have to be in current status to submit their LMAR? Why is that requirement in place? Couldn't we just change that?
I think that'd be fair enough.
That would save some of your time, I'm thinking.
Yeah, and again, this isn't something that occurs all the time, so that's not.
Right. But I can foresee it happening, like the report has to be submitted at the end of March, and maybe somebody doesn't have to renew until October, and so they're being, they're behind on whatever, I'm being gracious here, they're behind on whatever they're doing, and they're thinking, well, I don't have to renew until October, so I'll wait till September to submit my statistics, and then they can't do it.
Yeah, and I think
And-
it would just be a change that would need to be made to the online reporting
Yeah, I
system,
would
so we can
think,
work
yeah.
with them to get that.
And
See
I
if we
think
can get that
ultimately that
resolved.
would just save your
Mhm.
time, which I'm hearing is a little used up.
So I'll look into that.
Okay, thanks, Natalie.
And one question I have is the current LMAR, I had thought was going to be available on the licensed midwife page on the website, and I couldn't find it.
It has been updated, I believe, as of now. So
Okay.
it was a recent addition, but
And but previous ones are taken down? We don't have any previous ones up on the website?
I believe currently there's 2010, 11, and 12 are being added, and we're working with our ISB information office to get the previous years on.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from council members? Any comments from the audience? Just come forward. Just tell us your name as you.
Rosanna Davis, licensed midwife.
Hi.
I have a related question. We have a colleague, midwife, who died some years ago, and her license still is reported as delinquent on the website. And I was wondering if there's a mechanism for updating that.
We've had this discussion
I think you
before.
have to
She has to have
provide
a
a death
death
certificate.
certificate sent
Okay.
to the medical board.
And then,
She has to?
Yeah.
Her
Well,
family
her
does.
family.
She has to have one
Medical
sent
board has
for
to have
her.
one.
If we don't receive documentation of someone's death, the license will go into a canceled status after it's been expired for 5 years. But until we receive notification, then we can't officially update it.
all right. And then a related question, I don't know if I can bring this up here, but I'll try. I'm also in possession of all of her clients' records and don't know what to do with them.
I can talk to you after if you'd like.
Thank you.
Super, thank you. All right. Any other comments or questions on this agenda item? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move forward. So the next agenda item is the creation of a task force for a midwife information packet for board members. At the last board meeting, it was approved to create a task force to this end. And I know that Faith Gibson has long wanted to have this be something that is in the information packet that is given to new board members so that they understand a little bit better what licensed midwives do and how they're trained and what the history there is. I know that Faith, you already have a large volume of information to this end, and I'm wondering if you would be willing to work with one or two other people to condense it to a style that we could actually get physicians to read.
Faith Gibson, licensed midwife. Yes, there actually is a website right now that has information, and so we could do it both ways. We could do an attenuated version for physicians to read, and anyone who wants more information, here's the website to get background material or historical information or whatever. Sure, I'd be happy to do that with
I would love that.
with whoever would like to work with me.
I'm thinking, and maybe Dr. Byrne could speak to this, but I'm thinking if it's greater than 1 or 2 pages, it's not gonna muchly get looked at.
Right, and I would recommend not specifically for physicians, but actually for the community. Because this sounds like something that can be then utilized as part of a web page to prompt people with interest to dig deeper. And I would suggest it contains some real basics, including the distinction in California between a licensed midwife, a certified nurse midwife, physician, background on training, background on scope. And what the
It's going to be
requirements
hard to
for-
get all of that on one
page.
page.
can
I mean, if
do
you're going to
that
actually
first
talk
part in
about
3 sentences. So I'd
Okay.
be happy to work with you on that.
That
Sure.
would be
Again,
lovely.
it's not, because I think for the lay public and policymakers, a very concise description between the different maternity providers would be very valuable.
Well, the original purpose was for people who sat on the council.
No, on
So,
And the board.
and the board, okay.
Yeah, so
The
now it's a-
council and the board.
Yeah, this lets your
Okay.
work scale. If you're going to put the work into it, you have a benefit to a broader audience.
Okay.
think-
I'm available.
That would be lovely. It sounds like Dr. Byrne is as well.
As am I.
All right,
So-
thank you.
It's more than 2 people have to be noticed.
A noticed
Oh, that's true,
meeting.
more than 2. Well, there are only 2 of us on the council.
Still,
Dr. Byrne and
yeah,
That doesn't matter.
it doesn't matter. If it's an official meeting of,
How about a work group? If you call it a work group,
It doesn't change
different?
anything.
Okay.
Okay, then I won't.
I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Webb, but if the 3 of you decided to work outside this in advance of a task force or work group that was noticed,
I don't agree with that.
No.
Because you're doing,
You're setting up yourself, you're setting, yeah.
okay.
I'll let you guys work it out. You tell me what you decide.
Okay. So I was trying to save staff time there, but I guess that won't work. So,
the task force can meet to work out ideas. And it's not going to require staff time.
It has to be
And
noticed.
then
Then it has to be noticed.
if it's 2 people,
what we're talking about,
2 official people who are seated on doing
No,
official
no, a
committee.
meeting is 2 people, period. That's what you're.
right. So if Faith and Dr. Byrne met,
Fine.
we don't need to notice it or anything. Is that correct?
that's right. And then
Okay.
we could present the information.
At the next
MAC.
MAC meeting, and if it needed further work, then we could have another,
Your audience.
we could expand the audience or whatever. How does that sound to people? Does that work? Does that work for you, Faith?
I'd like another legal clarification. So if Faith and Dr. Byrne work on this, that is not a meeting that has to be noticed.
That's right.
If then Dr. Byrne discontinues his work with Faith so that he is no longer involved, and then I work with Faith, is that sidestepping things?
That
It
could
is.
be a serial.
Okay,
meeting.
it's a
I
serial
don't
meeting.
recommend it.
Serial meeting.
Serial monogamy.
But if you came back to the March meeting with what you had and it needed further editing that didn't really require Dr. Byrne, could Faith and Karen then work together?
Right, you can appoint.
We could appoint
the
another task force.
and
Okay.
replace Dr. Byrne with
So-
Ms. Ehrlich and go forward.
Okay, so let's do that. Let's have
2 people.
Ms. Gibson and Dr. Byrne get together over the next 3 months and hash this out and present it at the next MAC meeting. So, put that down here. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Any other comment from the MAC? All right. Seeing none, let's go forward then. So the next item is a discussion on assistance for a licensed midwife. And Ms. Lowe and Mr. Warden, if you'd come forward. So I think that we're all in agreement that we need to somehow define and delineate what a midwife assistant is and what they're allowed to do, what they're not allowed to do, what their training might look like, and so that everybody remains in a legal status. I would like I feel like there are a lot of task force that need to be happening. And I'm wondering if we could get a little more information from staff and postpone doing a task force on this particular item until after the March meeting.
Yes, that could be possible. I think one thing we should also state today is what you can use as a midwife assistant today, and that currently is another licensed midwife, a bona fide student midwife that's enrolled in a program, or if you're using any other kind of assistant, it'd be somebody who is doing something that doesn't require a license. So you're sort of limited right now, and that's the whole purpose of your midwifery assistant is to develop something that might be beyond what a layperson can do, but not necessarily be a student or a licensed midwife.
And so would that include, for instance, medical assistants are not licensed, so that and yet they can perform tasks that some might say you need a license for instance, in doing injections. If we're gonna send it out there to the community that they can perform functions that a license is not required for, I think we need to clarify, does that include giving someone an injection?
No, licensed midwife or medical assistants actually have a set of specific things they're allowed to do in statute.
Right, I understand that.
And right now we don't have a similar statute for midwife assistants or anything like that. So
I understand that.
So they're not the same.
Is a
category.
layperson allowed to give someone an injection with that person's consent?
Well, that would have to go to legal on that. I personally believe.
Like if my mother was prescribed vitamin B12 shots and I didn't have my midwifery license and I was asked to administer them, would that be practicing medicine without a license, or would that be illegal?
What if she was diabetic?
Okay, so let me ask you a question where we're trying to go with this, Ms. Mervon. Are we trying to figure out what a resume should look like for a person who wants to be an assistant? Or
No.
are we looking at what an assistant is today and clarifying that?
What I think I'm trying to clarify, Mr. Warden's trying to clarify, is there are many assistants out there now that have been practicing for many years in conjunction with licensed midwives. When are they stepping over the line of what's legal for them to do and what's not legal for them to do, so that they know where they stand? As we move forward with possibly getting statute changes to really delineate what a midwifery assistant looks like, because we're not going to be able to do that this year. Clearly, we have too many other
what
irons in the
determines
fire.
today? I'm still not clear, so I apologize. I'm still not clear. Today, what is the rule of thumb, or what is the rules within the community, or what's the rules within the practice of what defines an assistant?
Midwife assistants are generally trained by midwives.
So it's
Just
a in-person training program.
Right, similar to what a medical assistant would train with a physician who didn't go to a school.
Let's not compare. Okay, let's just try
But
and
there are no schools for midwife assistants. All of the midwife assistants that are out there are being trained by the midwives they serve primarily, or they might be trained by this midwife and then move to another area and continue to do what they've been doing in an assistant role with a different midwife.
So there's no educational expectation except for what you learn on the job training?
That's correct.
There is no time expectation other than the person you're working with assumes that you can do what you're being told to do?
That's correct.
Well, the person that the assistant is working with verifies that the person is able to do what she is capable of doing. It's like I wouldn't ask somebody to take a fetal heart whom I had not watched and verified that she was capable of getting the heart placement, getting the placement correct for finding the fetal heart. But it would be my job to listen and evaluate.
So you're the supervisor basically then, correct?
Essentially, yes.
Okay, so
Yes.
what we're trying to do is establish terms and conditions for a supervisor to have an assistant with? Is that what we're trying to do?
Yeah, except that it's not delineated in law. And so right now, all we're trying to do is figure out when do they cross over that line into practicing medicine without a license and put the licensed midwife and themselves at risk of prosecution.
Okay, so we've had the question where this is coming from. We've had the question of if the assistant shows up to a birth and the midwife is not there, can they proceed and start
No.
doing whatever they do? Okay.
That's a
So
no.
you're saying no, but is that but do you want that in the rules and
Ultimately, yes, we need to seek a statute change to clarify this. We can't do that this year. And so there are some things like taking a blood pressure, which is not going to cross that line. So
injections do, but so I'm saying
I
we
think
can't sit here, but we can't sit here and make this
No.
is a legal situation, but also with input from the community as to what's being done today. We have to have a list, I think, from the communities of what procedures they participate with currently. Is
Yes.
everyone in agreement across the board with those procedures being done? I'm just trying to help you get
we're,
to the end
we're
of
still
the
we're still
problem.
in process with creating that. We did have a task force a year ago to address these issues, and there have been other overriding issues that have taken precedence, and so we haven't really moved forward with the assistant issue. But I think we're in process for this coming year for fleshing that out so that in 2015 we can go back to the legislature and say, look, this is what we think is appropriate. We need you to craft language for us, or here's the language that we think is appropriate, and put it forward. But in the meantime, in the interest of public safety, midwives who cannot access a student or another licensed midwife have to have an assistant with them to protect the woman. Okay, it's a public safety issue. And, if you have a mother that needs attention and a baby that needs attention at the same time, you need two sets of hands. And so I'm just trying to facilitate having some sort of minimal background that it would be okay for that assistant to do. Like, is it okay for them to listen to the baby's heartbeat if the midwife is in the room and she's also listening, for them to actually hold the Doppler there on the woman's stomach?
What I'm suggesting, though, is that the process that you're trying to get to is by putting this out into a back and forth with licensing and enforcement versus the community that deals with this and legal. I'm not so sure that you wouldn't get a faster group of parameters by asking a group of people to gather the information of what's currently being done, then turn it over to legal to say, is this appropriate? To get some, we're just doing this back and forth, and you need like a task force or work group that can report back in 30 days to the staff and ask them to see if in fact this is fair and reasonable workplace rules. I think that we're just.
I understand what you're saying, Barbara. Thank you.
Apologize, but I'm
No,
just-
it's okay. Surely there must exist within the board some documentation of what constitutes practicing medicine without a license. I've seen documents from the past that related to medical assistants before we had regulations and statute for them. So I'm wondering if that could be researched by legal, and in March we could have a better delineation possibly about what that might look like, or maybe Ms. Webb has already done that research. That's what I'm trying to get at today, is are there things that absolutely cross that line? And are there things that, we could say probably are all right at this point, and recognize that we're moving forward with tightening it up, but in the meantime, have it on record that this is something that's going on out there, and that it isn't strictly legal, but it's not strictly illegal. And we need to create some leeway while we're fixing the problem, just like we did with the supervising issue. We knew that midwives couldn't get supervisors, and so we relaxed a little bit as we were going forward and trying to solve the problem.
I would like to add in here, when the question came up about whether an assistant might get there before the midwife and do something, I say yes. And what that is set up. That has nothing to do with the practice of medicine. That has to do with laying out items.
If that's what it is, but that has to be defined.
That's what I'm,
But
part
okay,
of what
so-
I'm talking about, and
But
I
what
think
Ms.
that,
Fairvon is asking for is she's asking for staff to come back with information.
yes, and
Okay,
I
so that's-
appreciate that. I'd also like that kind of thing to be considered in that, what I just mentioned, that for a non-medical person to simply lay out items that are, maybe there are no syringes there, there's no prescription medicine there. It's underpads, it's gauze pads, it's stuff that the midwife might need if she gets there and the birth is happening quickly. May a non-licensed person legally in this kind of a setting help in that way? Then there are CPR and neonatal resuscitation trainings. I certainly would not want to have somebody as my assistant who is not CPR and neonatal resuscitation certified. If indeed that is true, and it is an otherwise non-licensed person who has a neonatal resuscitation certificate, who's gone through that training, may she help me in a pinch? Because even if she does not have a license, there are gray zones that I'm trying to get at here that we need to really be looking at as well.
Request a comment?
Um,
No, I request a comment.
yeah, please.
Okay, so I think that your suggestion to look for precedences that are already in place, things that are already written for other aspects of healthcare is a wise one. Because as you said, the whole goal is safety
Right.
for women and their children.
That's right.
And I believe that in other spheres of the Medical Board of California, there's probably is clarity as far as the distinction between a lay person and the expectations for what actions they could take and the standards to take those actions, which are really low. People can give injections at home and the rest. But when those kind of actions are taking place under the license of another healthcare professional, it's a very different standard, both
Exactly.
for the credentials, the training to even be allowed to take the actions, but also then your performance. So I think even though it might be adding structure where people in the past not wanted structure, I think your suggestion is a wise one. Let's see what's already in place for those who perform their work under allied health professionals, under physicians, under advanced practice nurses. Because I think if it's safety is the goal, that's actually the best way to approach it.
So how do we get to that point? Do we ask staff to define that, or do we ask communities to come together to, as a work group, to define what is currently going on? Do we take a look at, I mean, how do we
I
get
think
there?
I think right now what Kurt said, the three avenues are what's in place right now. It's a licensed midwife, it's a bona fide student, or it's someone doing something that does not require a license. How that plays out can be found in case law, in part. So if someone is interested in that, the Boland case is something that you should take a look at, and I can give you the citation. Yeah. In other cases where someone has practiced without a license and what they've done that has been deemed by the courts to have crossed the line. And we're not going to be able to give you an answer today with a list of things that are permissible and what definitively will cross the line. And I would say that an assistant arriving before the licensed midwife could put that person and the midwife in a dangerous predicament.
And
I
it also
understand what
puts
you're
her,
saying.
it puts the woman in a dangerous predicament if nobody
That's-
attends to her at all.
That's right, but it's
So-
something you need to
I
keep that in
understand.
mind.
Yeah.
It's a dilemma.
I think Ms. Gibson has a comment.
Faith Gibson, licensed midwife. I just want to mention the emergency, there 2063, which is the emergency exemptions clause, that in a bona fide emergency, you're talking about a midwife in a rural area who doesn't have access to another midwife, and she only has a non-licensed assistant with her, and something happens, that in those kinds of circumstances, whatever needs to be done can be done by anyone, whether they're licensed or not. That's a different kind of situation than the structure of ordinary life, and that we shouldn't get. I am concerned when people talk about that the student can't come in the house because the midwife might get in trouble. If that student she knows how to do CPR and she knows how to do neonatal resuscitation, and she's sitting out in the car while the baby is in trouble, I tell my midwives my students not to worry because I'll kill them. You know, if they don't make themselves available. That under those circumstances, actually meeting the need is the issue, not this, keeping the midwife from possibly being criticized. And that is, I mean, I didn't make up the emergency exemptions clause. It comes from 1876. It's one of the oldest parts of the of the Medical Practices Act, and it covers everything. During the earthquake there in San Francisco in 1989, there were lay people who did tracheostomies on people who were trapped under the cement. So, we should make that distinction between the organized practice of medicine, midwifery, whatever, and a genuine emergency, and not get too confused about not confuse them with each other. That's it. Thank you.
I think this is an opportunity through a lot of the different meetings we're having to elevate the status of licensed midwives, to elevate the professionalism, elevate the levels of respect, and as part of that then what would follow the performance and the access for women for these services, which I think we all support. As part of elevating the status, there needs to also be elevating the status of those who serve in conjunction. So the emergency exemption list is very wise, but is it an emergency when a team is planning on working together? Doesn't it make sense that the licensed midwife has an assistant with the skills to be able to provide what is needed and anticipated?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're talking about two different things. I don't think anybody is going to bring charges against a layperson who assisted in a true emergency and possibly saved a life. What is really at issue here is defining what that scope looks like for a midwifery assistant who is not licensed and who is not a student.
I would like to actually...
That's what needs to move forward.
I agree with everything that both of you have just said, and I know that, for example, there are some midwife teachers who tell their students that if the midwife has not arrived yet, they must sit in the car and wait for the midwife to come. What if somebody runs out from the house and says, the baby's coming now?
And I think it's incumbent on that student to make her own decision about what she's going to do at that point.
Well,
yeah.
So I'm going to go back and suggest again that what you need to do, Ms. Sparvon, is decide what it is you want staff to do and ask them to do it, because he said, she said,
I think we need,
not doing us any good here.
We clearly need more discussion about this. Could
Yes.
we get more background information and set a task force for after the March meeting? Is that a possibility? Does that work for you?
We can do that for you. After the March meetings actually gives us some time to work on it. So.
Okay.
But to answer your question, there is no list I can give you. So
I hear that.
That
I'm hearing that.
unfortunately it'd be easy if I could. So
Yeah. No, I hear that. And so now everybody knows that it's an issue, and we're all going to be working on it. And hopefully, it won't be a critical issue that requires any board action before we get it fixed.
Can I ask a question? Does
Yeah.
all of this only apply to that third category of people, so not the students and not the another licensed midwife? Can those people still go inside and do an injection?
a
Or
licensed midwife absolutely may go in. The trouble
Yeah.
is the student.
The student cannot be on the premises without her supervisor.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything to add to that, or? All right.
I do have one other thing, and I know this is old. I know it's 30, 40 years old, but 30.
So are my
There was a
kids.
1983 listing in the medical board newsletter, and I understand that it's out of date, but couldn't that be a jump off? The things that are in there that are listed that an unlicensed person may do, there is a list.
for midwives,
No, it's
Is
just a list
jump
for
off.
unlicensed
It's
people.
for
Yeah.
unlicensed people at a medical event. Could we use that as a jump off? It might be a beginning to be able to give us some of the definition we're looking for.
I'd have to look at that list to
Okay.
answer
I
that
can
question.
send it to you.
But you're looking for a list, and
So
let
that's
me give
something
you a
you
little
could,
bit
you could
of,
look at and bring back to us in March.
li-
I would suggest we
every
keep precedents as already current era.
right every case that would
I like
be
it, though.
brought to the board for investigation would be looked at on its individual merits.
Right.
And so the decisions on whether something crossed the line is actually made at that determination during that investigation. As a licensed midwife and you have an assistant, you have to be looking out, number one, for the patient, and number two, whoever you're authorizing to help you do what you have to be willing to defend that in court. That's the bottom line.
Okay, I understand that. I would actually like to add one other item, which is that registered nurses who are licensed to give injections and are licensed to do medical functions, I think I've heard other midwives ask, may they hire and supervise RNs at births?
No.
I understand
No.
that is not currently available to us, and I would like the medical board or the staff to consider, to look at this and let us know what might need to happen in order for that to be able to be done. Because there are midwives in the state who would like to.
Well, that affects a different license type, so that would involve a different board also.
Yes, I understand that.
Could we at least get a determination as to what would have to go, what would have to happen for that to work?
We can.
Because I don't think it can work now.
I have a
It does
feeling
not work now. I can
No.
tell you that right now.
Understood.
So, whether it could work in the future, I don't know. The likelihood of that, I'm not sure. So we can look into that as part of while we're looking into the midwifery assistant thing. But actually, I think the midwifery assistant is probably a much more viable way to go at the moment. So that's my take on that. And it's because like I said, you're now asking the board to say you can hire somebody who is not even licensed by the board, or have board's oversight. Unlike for medical assistants, it's the physicians whose license is on the line for every medical assistant for whatever they do. You're basically, as a midwife assistant, your license is going to be on the line for whatever that medical
That's correct.
assistant does.
That's correct.
And like right now, even though we don't have bona fide guidelines of what is a medical assistant, anybody you use, your license is on the line, and your patient's health's on the line. So those decisions have to be made in accordance with, what your practice is, what's I would assume most midwives know what exceeding is. And so you have to make that decision on an individual basis and go, and the bottom line is if a complaint was filed with the board, it'll be investigated, and ultimately that investigation could lead to an administrative action against a licensed midwife, or maybe even a criminal filing against an assistant for practicing without a license. Whatever that is, both people need to be very comfortable with. And I'm not talking about the bona fide emergencies that Ms. Gibson talked about. That's a little bit different situation. So you really have to I'm going to go back with what Dr. Burns said. If you're working as a team, that's not really an emergency. So.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this item? Any other comments from council? Barbara?
I would just ask that as staff brings back this information, that somehow there is the opportunity for stakeholders to contact staff, and somehow what the community level of care, what the community standard is currently going on might be interesting to
I'm wondering.
know. So as they're doing an outreach to find this, as we go forward to define what an assistant's role is, and we're going to look to put it in codify it, we need to get as much information as possible. So I don't know if we want to do it as part and parcel of coming forward in March or after March, but we need to, I think, put on notice our community stakeholders that what are you guys doing now? What are the barriers, or what is the community standard?
Is that something that CAM could take on to gather that information and get it to Ms. Lowe or Mr. Warden?
My impression, and just for the record, Ms. Rock is nodding her head yes. That would be absolutely appropriate, and we need to recognize that there is a significant number of midwives in the state who are not members of CAM. How do we get this information from them as well? So it can't just be lodged with CAM.
Somebody could put a notice on the California Yahoo group that CAM is gathering that information, and people could contact CAM to give it to them directly.
Absolutely. And I still don't know whether we are going to end up getting information from all of the midwives.
If they don't want to participate, they don't want to participate, and we can't fix
We can only try and do
that.
the best we can do. We can't
Yes.
fix everything all the
Yes.
time for everyone, but
No.
let's try and fix what we can fix with an open heart and an open mind.
I'm just trying to express the limitations.
Well, I
That's
understand
all.
we got limitations.
There's always going to be limitations, and my thought is that, midwives in this state who don't want to participate with CAM, that's their choice. However, CAM is the body in this state that represents licensed midwives, and if we get the word out that they are creating a document to give to the medical board regarding assistance, and people choose then not to participate in that, that's their choice. But we can't fix it if they don't want to engage. So.
But remember that the address, hopefully current, of every licensed midwife in this state is available on the medical board website.
Right. It's
And
not
it
hard
could
to
be
contact these
easily
people.
Available
I
to contact
I have a question on that level. Is the medical board willing to supply us with mailing labels for all of the midwives who are licensed so that we could send out a mailing to this effect?
The board can provide names and addresses of licensed midwives.
But we would have to get them onto labels ourselves, in other words.
Yeah.
Would we have to type them all in?
Yeah, we would.
We could format that into a label that could be printed for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a public comment here. Just
Kelly
state your-
Olmsted, licensed midwife. CAM actually did that. We downloaded everything from the medical board website to send out a letter back in May that all of this stuff was taking place in the first place. So the problem is that it's not going to be updated, but it isn't an impossibility to do that. However, it is expensive for CAM to do.
Yeah.
Labels can also be requested from Department of Consumer Affairs or purchased through their public document requests.
Okay. So there is a way to get it out to everybody. But my guess is that if CAM submitted something to all of their members and it also went out to the CA Midwives Yahoo group, all of the midwives in the state that are practicing would know about it. I don't think they need individual letters, seriously. The grapevine works real well.
Understand, my point was not to every person to be pigeonholed to what is it you're doing with an assistant.
Yeah,
My idea
no.
was to get what is the general conception of what the community standard of care is by midwives who are using assistants.
I agree.
And, a few opinions is better than none.
Yes.
So,
That's
I
what
was
I
trying
would
to
think
make
we
your
would
life
end up
easy,
with.
not
Yes.
more difficult. I apologize.
No, I
can make it more
that's what
difficult
I
if
was
you'd like.
thinking too, Barbara. Thank you. All right. Any other comments on this agenda item? All right. Seeing none, we're going to move forward. We need to decide when the next Midwifery Advisory Council meetings are going to be for the next year. So I think tab number 11 has the possibilities. We could do March 1st. Does anybody have a preference for the 20th or the 27th?
They're Thursdays. They're all Thursdays. I might have a conflict on the 27th.
Does anybody else have preference?
Preference is the 27th. I'm speaking in LA on the 17th, but I could flex and still do the 20th.
Unfortunately, I won't know until I'm there.
Okay, well then,
20th is acceptable.
It is.
you're speaking in LA on the 20th or on the 27th?
On the 17th at the March of Dimes convention. So.
Okay, so the 27th is better. And Karen, you don't know yet about the
I
27th?
won't know until very close to the date, I don't think.
All right, well then, we can't
How about
really
this?
use your
How
input.
about if everybody takes a look at the dates, and within the next, let's say, month, or by the end of the year, is that good enough for you, Ms. Lowe, that
I
they
think
get
we
back?
need to figure it out now because
everybody
getting back to
fine,
Miss
sorry.
Lowe's already taxed. Let's not make her job more difficult.
We really just need to know for the March date, if at all possible today, if not within the next, I'd say, week.
And
Due
the
to the
problem
holidays
is
coming up,
I'm
we need
not
to get
gonna
this
know.
scheduled.
All right, well then, if you can't know, And Dr. Byrne has a problem with the 20th. Let's do the 27th unless anybody else has a problem. I already checked Easter and Passover, and they're both in April, so.
I did provide a copy of all
Late.
the holidays, which is the next page in your packet, so just in case this came up.
Oh, thank you. I didn't see that either.
April 15th, it says first
so
day,
on
which
the ball.
might mean
I
that the
remember last
Seder
year
is
everyone pulling out
the
their
13th.
iPhones.
Yeah, no, I loved that. That was
Okay.
great. All the
Can
holidays.
we make a determination about the August dates?
So what,
Anybody
hang
have
on a second.
preferences?
What did we determine on March?
We just said the 27th for March.
Okay, I might not be able to be here.
Okay, well, hopefully you will. Does anybody have a preference for the August dates? I'd like to kind of know now so that vacations can be planned and maybe other people care too.
No.
Is earlier or mid-August better?
Really hard to know.
Okay, then I like the 14th. Anybody have a problem with that? I love the 14th. Okay. And December next year, I prefer actually this time of the month in December rather than
Yes, the
middle
4th.
of the month. Is that better for everybody?
Yes.
All right, the 4th. All right, so we've got them. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right. So the next item is agenda items for the next Midwifery Advisory Council meeting. So in addition to an update on the midwifery program statistics and an update on the AB 1308 regulations as they're proceeding, I would also, we need to revisit the assistant issue. I think we just decided that. We need to probably, at that point, form a task force or working group to look over the LMAR and how we might dovetail it better with MANA and what kind of recommendations we want to come up with surrounding that. Anybody have anything else?
I would like us to have some kind of a decision, discussion around the issue of women who get to 42 weeks and as relates to patient abandonment.
Should we get any information back from medical supply houses or from whomever you get medical supplies for process, how that's going? I mean, should we survey a few people, a few groups out there, not to make sure that, I don't know, do they come from pharmacies or do they come from medical supply houses? Are there corporations that could be asked, are you aware of it? Just to know, are they aware of it out there that it's moving forward and now the law is being accepted? So
All
that
right.
we don't have to hear that people do have problems or don't. Maybe it's not an issue that.
I would imagine that the bigger issue might be ordering ultrasounds.
Okay, so I can probably speak to that at the next meeting since I am starting my own home birth practice again, and we'll have to be setting up all of this stuff. It would also, I think, be really helpful if CAM had some data regarding that maybe that they could supply at the next meeting with how your members are working through this and whether or not people are having difficulties so that we could decide whether we need some sort of letter like Karen proposed today or not. Anybody else have anything? Maybe we could, we'll need an update on the working group between the two of you for the information to the board. And wait a minute. Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
Oh,
yeah.
Did we talk about a newsletter article going in?
It was part of Ms. Lowe's presentation that there will be a newsletter article out.
Right.
That goes to physicians, correct?
As part of the implementation of AB 1308, that's going to be part of the outreaches.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I saw that there.
But also, I was unclear if Karen, were you wanting another agenda item for the MANA stats for the rest of your statistics?
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I do have that here. I
About
just
the
missed it.
LMAR stats and how, in terms of the adjustments that we're being mandated to do in the reporting fields, how can we get more accurate information about perinatal deaths. And that might include needing OSHPD to be involved, because it could involve changes in the website, in the report.
Maybe we could
system.
have somebody from OSHPD at that meeting so that we could have a broader discussion. And Karen, if you could come prepared to really itemize what those things are,
Yes.
that would be also really helpful.
So let me ask you a question. Are the statistics reported to OSHPD on an annual basis at the same time? Is there one date for everybody, or does everybody do it
No,
on their own?
they're due at the end of March every year.
March
So every year-
30th.
March 30th.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
everybody
for
reports.
the next meeting, though, it probably wouldn't be the appropriate time to have OSHPD come in. But as we mentioned earlier, with the changes to the reporting, we can't take anything away.
Right.
But we can look at what is being reported, and when I say we, you
The royal we.
could take a look, and we can edit the text. And
Yes.
what we should be doing is, before we have OSHPD come in and say this is the changes that we want, we need to document what language we want changed or what would be helpful. So we can put in client text to help clarify what the questions are, how to answer them. And then we can meet with OSHPD to determine how we can make those changes happen.
Okay.
I recognize and understand what you're saying. I also know that there are a couple of these changes that have been suggested in the past that never got implemented, that should work pretty well.
Well, and it depends on what it is, because some of them may have to go into regulation to provide clarification, and others may just be something that can be provided on the actual report to help identify what you're actually asking for. So you might want to fold that into your working group that you're going to be
I'm
putting
wondering
forward.
if, as Karen works on this, if maybe could you by the 1st of February have something to staff that says these are the changes that I think would be really easy for OSHPD to change, and could that be done? And if it could be done, then maybe OSHPD could be at that meeting. And if it needs further discussion and stuff, then you guys could get back to Karen and say, no, we're not there yet. Is that?
The earlier you send them to us, that way we can run them past Ms. Webb. We can see if it's something
Yeah.
that we'll have to put into the work group for regulations, or if it's something we can just ask OSHPD to add to the form. It
And-
just really depends on what it is.
I am not imagining anything that would take away anything from the current fields. There would be nothing eliminated.
Just be a way to change the form so that
Changing
it was
the format
it
to
was
an
more
extent
understandable.
So that, well, that's even another side of it. But getting more detail, for example, on all the lines that say other, what is other? In terms of perinatal deaths, it has to do with how they get entered initially, and the fact that currently we are entering them 3 times instead of once, and
Yeah.
then it going into.
I don't think any of that requires regulation, because
That's what I'm saying.
it didn't in the first place, as long as those
I think we're getting
elements are
beyond what we're
in.
allowed
So Karen, can you
I'm just saying that it's not regulation stuff.
can you be communicating with Ms. Lowe as the appropriate person by the 1st of February with what you think are easy fixes and what you think are going to require a more prolonged discussion, and then Ms. Lowe can get with Ms. Webb and we can figure out, are you on target with what you think needs to happen or not, and then by the end of March we can know whether we need OSPED at that meeting or not.
Yes.
Is that a reasonable way to move forward? Okay. Anybody else have any agenda items they'd like to? Ms. Davis? You have to come up, please. Oh, yeah,
She's
sorry.
nursing.
Oh, nursing baby.
In March or at a further into the year next year, if there could be an agenda item about the challenge mechanism after the
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like then, if legal could give us a report on how they feel like that needs to be implemented as we move forward at the March meeting. Does that work for you, Ms. Webb?
I'll do some research on that.
Okay. Thank you. All right. No further public comment? Any further council comment? Great. Since there's no further comments from anyone or orders of business, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second? Any opposed? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much, and I hope we see a lot of you back here at 1:30.